Hello and welcome to the Addicts Anonymous podcast. I'm your host, Jamar. Today's episode 115, and we're interviewing Myles H. How are you doing today, Myles?
I'm well, Jim. How are you?
I'm doing well. So let's get started here. Tell me about growing up. How was your childhood?
So, growing up, the first 5 years, I lived with my grandparents. I wasn't really sure why until later on in life, but what I found out was around age 23 was that my mom cheated on her husband with her best friend and had me, and then my dad left. My dad already had my brother and already had a wife. And so after my mom had me, he decided to go home to my brother and to his wife. So my mom moved back in with my grandparents, and my grandparents helped raise me the first 5 years of my life. My mom did everything she could possibly do for me. She worked two jobs. If I wanted to play soccer, she was going to coach soccer. I remember Halloween time, we would go to a fabric store, and my mom and my grandma would hand sew my Halloween costumes. So, that was good. When I was 5, my mom met my adopted dad, and I moved in with him. Trouble really didn't start until my half sister came along. And then I found out that I was adopted. And that's when problems really started for me, because I would look at the way my adopted dad would treat my sister and the way he would treat me, and it wouldn't really make sense to me. She was the queen. She was the apple of his eye. And, there are a lot of arguments in my
So
home.
that's your mother's boyfriend adopted you?
My mom's new husband.
Adopted you. Okay.
My mom's new husband adopted me. I always believed that he adopted me because I was part of the package, and my mom wouldn't marry him if uh, he didn't adopt me. Today I'm happy to say my relationship with my parents isn't perfect, but it's a work in progress. I can have conversations with my adopted dad today. Me and my mom are working on rebuilding our relationship. So childhood, my parents did the best they could. We went on vacations and stuff like that. No childhood is perfect. My parents definitely tried the best they could.
Okay. So how was it growing up in school? How was your childhood as far as your relationships and things like that?
So school was hard. I was always bullied. Um, you know, uh, I had ADHD as a child, so I got bored really, really easy. Um, and I was kind of too smart for my own good, so I got bored with the curriculum. So I didn't really apply myself. Although in my eighth grade year, at the end of the year, I ended up winning the academic award, the presidential award for academic achievement. So I improved my grades from sixth and seventh grade during my eighth grade year. That the president of the United States actually gave me the academic award of achievement. So that was kind of cool.
That's
And
amazing.
then I opted not to go to my hometown high school. I opted to go to a vocational school. And so that was an experience. I came out of the closet very shortly after I entered high school. Unfortunately, someone I sort of was dating at the time to keep me being out of the closet hush hush, and to keep everything okay at home, I printed out an AIM conversation I had with her. And in that AIM conversation, it had talked about a boy. I still remember his name, actually. His name was Johnny Casadino. And I was talking to her about how I liked him and how I thought he was flirting with me. And she printed out that conversation and distributed it to my entire class. So that ended up making high school rather hard for me. A lot of homophobia, a lot of homophobic comments.
What age did
But
you know you were gay?
I don't know exactly what age I knew I was gay. I remember being in maybe middle school, and so on the bus we would drop off the elementary school, and then we'd go to middle school. And I remember going to the elementary school and looking at my coach, or their coach, and thinking the coach was attractive. So I don't really know exactly what year I knew I was gay. However, I do remember having attraction to another man at age 13. And really that's when I started experimenting with other men and stuff like that.
Gotcha. So how was social life?
Social life, my social life consisted, my adopted dad's family owns a farm. So it was me, my half sister, and then his sister's four girls. And then his other sister had three stepchildren. But they weren't living there all the time. So it was me and my four cousins all the time. We hung out all the time. And then when I wasn't hanging out with them, I was an EMS worker. I was on my town's first aid squad. So I hung out with other EMTs and other EMS workers, and I also hung out in my youth group. My parents put me and my sister in a Christian summer camp, and through that summer camp, I got involved in the youth group, which overall was a great experience. I don't regret it. However, it was a Baptist youth group and a Baptist summer camp, and so they didn't really agree with the whole homosexuality thing. So that's really where my first struggle with religion and being gay started. I was told that if I loved God, that I would pray to him to remove my homosexuality. And I remember doing that a couple of days. And I remember feeling really, really conflicted. I wanted to go to college to become a minister. And I knew in my heart of hearts that I loved God, but I'm being told to pray to him to take this away from me, and he wasn't taking it away from me. So it ended up causing a lot of confusion for me for a lot of years.
So what was it like? I guess this is a question. What age did you first start using drugs?
So when I was 13, I started working at a local bagel shop, uh, and weed was rather popular there. There were some people who smoked weed. So I started smoking weed at 13. I started smoking cigarettes at 13. Um, at that time, my parents would give me a drink here and there, around the house or at a party or something like that. And then when I turned 17, 18, at family parties and stuff like that, I was allowed to drink. I didn't start doing harder drugs until I ended up getting expelled from college, and I ended up eventually moving to New York City. And that's when hard drugs really came into my life. Before that, I had a small bout of addiction to pain pills. I had gotten in a pretty bad accident and did a whole bunch of damage to my lower back. And so I was prescribed pain pills pretty much all the time. And I got addicted to them pretty quickly. I went away to rehab for that and beat that addiction.
Let's take a step back real quick. How was
Sure.
college life? And how was college life and why did you get expelled?
So college life was I made a lot of friends. I was no longer with my parents. I was free to be who I wanted to be, free to do what I wanted to do. I really, really enjoyed it. So I ended up meeting someone in college who also went to my college. He didn't stay at the dorms. He stayed in an apartment by himself. And it turned out this guy was kind of a creep. And I decided I no longer wanted to be with him. And he didn't really take that well. And so he started stalking me on campus. And so I went to my student advisor for help, and I ended up getting suspended for 3 days. And then the day I got back from my
Why'd you get suspended?
I got expansion. I got suspended for homosexual activity. They didn't call it homosexual activity. They called it behavioral reasons. But so the college also, the college was an Assemblies of God college, and they didn't believe in practicing homosexuality. So they called it behavioral issues, but really it was because I was practicing homosexual behaviors. So I got back from my suspension. I was going to church because we had church every day, and it ended up that we didn't have church, and my student advisor called me into his office, which at that point the student advisor's director came in, and they told me I had a choice. Either I could go to reprogramming camp and be reprogrammed, or I could leave college, and I chose to leave college.
How'd that make you feel?
It made me feel a variety of emotions. I felt lost. I felt hurt. I didn't really know what I was going to do. I didn't know how I was going to make it. I didn't know how I was going to support myself. At that point, my parents weren't really willing to help me anymore. They weren't willing to take me back in their house. So I was really, really scared. I didn't know what I was going to do.
That must have been difficult. I can only imagine. So, no, go please.
It was, looking back though, the experiences I faced leaving college and when I got expelled from college has just made me that much more of a rounded individual. I went through a lot of things that I can now say I don't regret, because I'll be able to help someone one day. And that's my ultimate goal, is to be able to help someone.
It's a noble goal.
Yeah, thank you.
So once you left college, what'd you do with your life?
So I ended up having to sleep with older men for shelter. So that was a lot of my life for part of my life. I eventually ended up getting a job and leaving where I was staying with the person I was having sex with, and moving into an apartment with someone else. I rented the back bedroom, and I stayed there for a short while. Like I said, that was during the time that I had gotten addicted to opiates, and I ended up going away to rehab for opiates. After that, after rehab, my parents put me into a homeless shelter that was also a rehab program, a Christian-based rehab program. I stayed there for about 3 weeks, and then I ended up moving to New York City. That's when hard drugs ended up really coming into my life. That's when my drug of choice entered my life, my drug of choice being crystal meth and GHB. And once I moved to New York City, things were crazy. I was in the city that never sleeps. I was doing crystal meth and having sex with a bunch of different people, and I thought I was living the dream. It wasn't really until I sat down for dinner with a really good friend of mine, and he looked at me and he was like, listen, you're killing yourself and I can no longer watch you kill yourself. And he said, I'm gonna have to take a step back from our friendship until you're ready to not kill yourself anymore. And I remember that night leaving. We were in Chinatown, and I remember leaving Chinatown and walking around. And now this person is pivotal in my life. He was pivotal in my coming out. He was pivotal in my first relationship. He was just always really there for me. And so hearing him say that really, really bothered me because I didn't want to hurt him, and I wanted him in my life. And I found myself at the Gay and Lesbian Center, and there was a Crystal Meth Anonymous meeting that was going on, and I ended up going to that Crystal Meth Anonymous meeting, where I was welcomed with open arms. I ended up getting really, really involved in the fellowship. I had the gift of desperation at that point, or at least I was told I had the gift of desperation, and so I was going to meetings, and I ended up going away to rehab for a second time. I was homeless at the time, so rehab seemed like a really good idea because not only would it let me work on my addiction, but it would get me off the streets for a month and allow me to figure out what I was going to do.
Who did you, going back just a minute, who did you first use drugs with?
This guy I met on an online hookup site. I went over his apartment, and he passed me a meth pipe and asked me if I had ever done it before. I said no. He asked me if I wanted to, and I'll just be quite blunt. He was really, really hot, and I didn't want him to ask me to leave. So I said, yeah, I'll try it. Again, I don't regret doing it because today I live a really beautiful life, so I don't regret saying yes to that. I don't regret becoming addicted to crystal meth. I don't even regret my decisions, really. I wish that some things were different and some things had turned out differently. But one of the beautiful things about recovery is that we kind of get a do-over. And so, right now I'm in the process of being able to do some things over and being able to work on some of the relationships that I've caused harm in.
So tell me about the progression of your disease? Like, how did it start getting incrementally worse, and what was going on in your life?
Okay, so I have been addicted to crystal meth for 12 years. Excuse me. And I really didn't see the progression at first. It wasn't really until these last maybe 5 or 6 years that my relapse became shorter, but my relapse became shorter because I went that much harder during my relapses. So to bring you through the last 12 years, you know, at first it started off every once in a while, and then it was an everyday thing, but it was an everyday thing because I was also homeless, and that's how I found shelter. I would go over
How did you
older
become
men.
homeless? Real quick, how did you become homeless?
I didn't. I lost my place to stay in New York City. I relapsed, and so I ended up losing my job at Starbucks, and I lost my place to stay. And then people in the fellowship were letting me stay with them, but honestly, I was too much of a mess. I wasn't ready to stop using drugs, and I wasn't ready to do what was being asked of me, and so it honestly was just easier to be homeless. I didn't have any rules I had to follow. I didn't have anyone who I had to listen to, and I had a couple of what I thought were friends, and one of them I can say was really a true friend. All the other ones really weren't friends; they were fuck buds. Let's be honest, that's what they were. But so I would go over to their apartments and be able to stay there for a couple days at a time. So that's kind of what I chose to do at that time. During that process, I ended up contracting HIV, and that was a really hard pill for me to swallow. It's still to this day kind of a hard pill to swallow. It's not as hard as it was 12 years ago when I got diagnosed, but it's still, it I still have my issues with it. Eventually, I ended up getting introduced to the needle, and that's really where my addiction started taking off. That's really where I was able to see the progression. Not only now was I smoking meth every single day, but I was shooting up at least once a day. And in the beginning, it was once a day. Towards the end, it was sometimes 2, 3 times a day, sometimes 4 or 5 times a day. Um, and every single time I would decide to shoot up was when I had something major going on in my life, whatever it may be. I had to be somewhere, or I had to show up for something. And it's not that I wouldn't show up. Sometimes I wouldn't show up, but sometimes when I would show up, I wouldn't all be there. And looking back, I'm really, really blessed that whatever you want to call it, higher spirit, whatever you want to call it, something had its hand on me, and I wasn't harmed, because I put myself in situations where I could have really, really been harmed. So I ended up, another part of the progression for me was I ended up starting selling crystal meth. And so now I have copious amounts of meth, and I have access to meth 24/7. And so now I'm doing it 24/7, and that's becoming my life. What was a weekend thing, or only on days where I was at my friends or my fuck buds' houses, became an everyday thing for me, because now I'm the one getting the hotel rooms. I'm the one people are calling to get it. And so now not only do I have to serve them, but I have to stay up so I'm able to serve them. I ended up getting in trouble with the law a couple of times.
What
But
kind of trouble?
So I got arrested. I got arrested a couple of times. I got arrested in Connecticut, crossing state lines. I was on Metro North, and I was going to meet a customer of mine. And he actually ended up setting me up, and so the cops were there waiting for me. I got put on non-report probation for that for 3 years. Um, I got arrested in New York City for possession. And then this last arrest was the arrest that I couldn't get out of. And I ended up not just getting a slap on the wrist for, which was down here in Georgia. I got arrested for trafficking, and, ended up doing prison time. I was able to plead my charge down to distribution, or intent with possession with intent to distribute, because they couldn't prove trafficking. However, I ended up having to do almost 3 years in prison.
It's a long time.
Yeah. It's not something I ever want to do again. I try to look at the good and not the bad. So I ended up meeting my partner in prison. We ended up both getting put into segregation 2 days apart, and I became his roommate. And when we had first met when I had first gotten to the prison, and he was up at multi-purpose room when I was doing my orientation, and I didn't realize at the time that he was trying to hit on me, but he was trying to hit on me. And so when we became roommates, we both ended up saying this is nothing but what it is. Like it's never going to become anything. It's never going to be more than what it is. And we are together a little over 3.5 years now, and we're planning a wedding. So, I try to remember that part of prison. I try to remember, the what it taught me. I try to remember my time spent, uh, reflecting and stuff like that, and not the bad memories. I will say, prison is rough. We had someone in one of my dorms who had been dead for 12 hours, and they didn't find him until he had already been dead for 12 hours.
How'd he
You
die?
know, there was bacteria in the water, and then he ended up, something. I don't know exactly the exact cause of death, but I know that when they did the autopsy, they found that there was bacteria in his body from the drinking water.
Wow.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So, you know, prison is really rough. It's really, really overcrowded, and it's just not ran properly. There's not enough uh correctional officers to run the dorms, and so sometimes we're going 2, 3, 4 days without seeing an officer other than when it's count time.
Do you consider that a good or a bad thing?
um it's dangerous, you know what I mean. It leaves open a wide window for anything and everything to happen, so I consider it not such a great thing.
So once you were released from prison, what did you do?
So initially I went to a program, and then I ended up leaving that program about 6 hours later. Unfortunately, I wasn't quite ready to get sober yet. And so I left that program and I went back to what I knew, which was doing and selling drugs. Um, Unfortunately, unfortunately, um, so I called my partner, and I told my partner, and my partner didn't want to leave me on the streets homeless, and so he did what he thought was right at the time and introduced me to the person who I ended up getting my drugs from. And that ended up just being a disaster. I ended up causing a lot of harm, not only to myself, but to my partner. We ended up going through a 4 month time period where we didn't talk to each other. And what I later found out was that we didn't talk to each other because he had to step away. He had to step away from our relationship because he knew not only was I hurting myself, but I was hurting him, and I was hurting our relationship. So we literally went through a 4 month time period where I hadn't heard from him, where I didn't know if he was okay, where I didn't know what was going on with him. And that really, really bothered me for two reasons. It bothered me for reason number one being that the last couple of conversations I had with him, I was accusing him of being a drug dealer and not my husband, and that wasn't the case. The case was that the situation was out of his hands. He couldn't do for me any more than he had already done for me, and really, he shouldn't have even been doing that. But he was doing his best with what he had. And the second reason being that I didn't know when I would get to talk to him again, and he's still currently in prison. And it bothered me. But since entering the program I'm in now, we've gotten to talk again. We've been writing each other And probably about 2 or 3 weeks ago, I actually got to talk to him on the phone. So, you know, when I got out of prison, I like I said, I went back to that lifestyle. January 5th, I decided I couldn't take it anymore. I went away to a Christian program. I ended up staying there for 4 months. They knew about my sexuality. We really didn't talk about it until one day we kind of decided to talk about it. I didn't want to talk about it, but it ended up coming up. I had asked a simple question. They took it a little bit further, and they ended up praying for me in tongues. And I told one of our leaders that they needed to get the director, that they needed to find me a new program. The director encouraged me to sit and pray, at which point I probably sat for about 10 minutes. And then I decided, I didn't want anything to do with it. I knew that talking to my partner was going to be hard there. I knew that, it was all going to be really, really hard there. And I was willing to stay if it would have worked out. But I ended up going to the director and, telling him I wasn't going to stop talking to my partner. And he told me that that program probably wasn't for me. At which point I had a small relapse, a 2-week relapse, where I ended up back in the psych ward. And now I am at Sober Living America, up here in Marietta, Georgia. And it has been a beautiful experience. My life
What
has
landed you
gotten.
in the psych ward?
I was suicidal.
Okay.
I was planning on getting a gun and killing myself. I didn't want to live life anymore. I was miserable. At that point, I was sleeping on the streets, actually on the streets, like on the hard concrete. Um, and I was miserable, and I knew better. I knew there was a better life out there for me. I just didn't know how to go about getting it. And I went into Northside Hospital down here in Georgia, in Atlanta, and I told them that I needed to be admitted into a psych ward because I was thinking about killing myself. And they asked me how, and I told them I was going to get a gun and shoot myself. And I ended up spending 2 or 3 days in evaluation in Northside, where they reached out to the mental health hotline and got me funding to go to Peachford Hospital. And I spent about a week in Peachford Hospital before I came here. But that was really good transition for me. So it gave me time to get back on some psych meds I needed to be on. It gave me time to recover from my last relapse. And then I came to here where I'm at now.
How do you like it where you are now?
I love it. I love it. All in all, I absolutely love it. The program has its moments, but every program has its moments. Life has its moments. You know what I mean? And so I try to put the glasses on backwards and to see things in a different way. And what I mean by that is I try to focus on the positives and not the negatives. You know what I mean? There's going to be negatives in every single situation. It's how I react to those negatives. It's how I react. That's what's important. And this program has enabled me to receive a lot of blessings. I have an apartment now. I share it with 5 other people. I am working on step work. I have a job again. I have money in my pocket every week. I'm able to pay my rent every single week. I go to meetings, not only to Addicts Anonymous meetings, but I go to other meetings as well, almost every single night. And I've gotten to get a social network again. I've gotten to get involved socially with I don't want to say good people because I believe everyone is good, but with healthy people, that's probably the word I'm looking for. With healthy people, um, and people who have the millionaire mindset. And so what I mean by the millionaire mindset is, and this was explained to me a really long time ago, is a friend sat me down and said, Myles, do you know why I hang out with millionaires? And I said, no, why? And he said, because then maybe one day I'll be a millionaire. And so when I'm speaking about the millionaire mindset, what I mean is people who are doing everything and anything they can to improve their lives, you know. um and I find it really, really important that I surround myself with those type of people.
Yeah, the good old fashioned saying, you are who you surround yourself with.
Yep.
So how you staying sober nowadays?
So I am, like I said, I'm working the steps with my he goes to AA, but we are both drug addicts. So we're working the steps right now. I am on my fourth step. My harms and my resentment list is what I'm currently working on. I've recently gotten involved in Addicts Anonymous, and I'm working on helping grow that group. Uh, Yesterday, I became the the regional representative for the Southeast region. Come check out our Facebook page. It is Addicts Anonymous Southeast Region Group. If you're in the Southeast region, we would love to have you. So that's keeping me busy and that's helping me stay sober. And then I'm just enjoying life. You know what I mean? It's been a really, really long time since I have just enjoyed life. And sometimes that looks like me laying on my couch and watching TV. Sometimes that looks like me laying in bed watching Hulu. Sometimes that looks like me going out and hanging out with friends. I'm blessed to have four other homosexuals in this program with me. And I've been blessed to spend a lot of time with them. And not that I can't hang out with other people who aren't homosexual, but like we make sure we hang out at least once a week. And that's our time to talk about whatever we want to talk about. And it's a safe place for us to go. We go away from our apartments and we go somewhere and we just talk and we talk openly and honestly. And so that's been a real blessing for me. And I just I take the next right action today. I live my life with integrity today, and I don't do it perfectly. My sponsor shares a whole bunch of things and he calls them ideals. And he says, this is an ideal and this is where I'd like you to be. Doesn't mean you have to get there today, but the ultimate goal is to get there. And I found that really, really freeing, because then I don't put pressure on myself to do this perfectly and I allow myself to make mistakes. And that's another thing. I make mistakes today. I don't do anything perfect. You know what I mean? And I allow myself to I allow myself to make those mistakes, but I also don't get lost in those mistakes. So when I realize I'm making one of those mistakes or I'm not running my program to the best of my ability, normally by my sponsor lighting my ass on fire, I come back to the basics and I start doing the basics again. And for me, the basics is calling other addicts every single day. The basics for me is writing a gratitude list, and something new that has become one of the basics for me is writing a journal on how I feel, specifically with my father passing away. I just recently found out my dad passed away, and I really, really struggled with it for a couple of days, and I didn't see progress. And I had said to my sir the last time we talked about it before I started writing this journal, you promised me on Sunday when I told you about this, that would be the worst day, and I'm not seeing any progress. And he said, well, what are you doing to see progress? And at that time, I wasn't doing anything. I wasn't doing anything to allow myself to feel better. And so that's how the journaling idea came up. And so I try to write in my journal about how I am feeling about my father and his death every single day, as well as my gratitude list, as well as reaching out to other addicts.
That's great. So my last question that I ask everybody is, do you have any advice for people watching and listening?
Yeah. So if you are addict, doesn't matter what the addiction is. I got a couple pieces of advice. Be kind to yourself. Be gentle with yourself. You know, that's something one of our other founders in really, that's where the founder, even the founder of 12 steps in general, you know, the 12-step program struggled to do. You know, page 16 of the big book talks about how he struggled the first year and a half being kind and being gentle with himself. So just be gentle with yourself. Be kind to yourself. Allow yourself to make mistakes. Allow yourself to feel feelings. Allow yourself to be exactly where you're at. My second piece of advice would be, you know, chase this program, chase recovery like your life depended on it, because your life does depend on it. And my third piece of advice would be, you know, if you're not ready, if you don't feel like you're really committed to this program, and I hate saying it, but it's the truth. It's been the truth in my life. You know, maybe you need to go do a little more research until your ass is on fire enough, or until you've hit a bottom enough that you're ready to do anything. Because what I found in my life was, until I was willing to go to any lengths, until I was willing to do whatever my sponsor and my core group of people told me to do, this program, whether it be Addicts Anonymous, whether it be Gamblers Anonymous, whether it be Sex and Love Anonymous, wouldn't work for me. And that's because, not because of the people in these 12-step fellowships, but because of me, because I wasn't willing to listen what they were telling me to do. So if you're not willing to listen to what people are going to tell you, I wouldn't even ask for advice.
That makes complete sense. So let me ask you, do you have anything else you want to add?
No, I don't think so. Life is beautiful. You know, you've got to look for those small moments when the universe is speaking to you, and I see them on a daily basis. You know, I went from a point in sobriety this time where I was on that point cloud where things were really, really good, and I was getting tons of blessings. And then I went through a period where I was really, really low. You know, I had lost my father. I had a couple other things happen, and I was just really, really low. And I'm happy to say today that life has really started to balance itself out. You know, I have a balance of really, really good things and some really, really low things. You know, and I just feel really, really balanced today. But that's because I do what I'm supposed to do, and I work the steps, and I make meetings, and I make recovery my number one priority.
It's great advice. I really appreciate that.
Thank you.
So I think that's all we got for today. So for everybody watching and listening, if you like what you heard and saw, go below and give us a like. Also subscribe to see when we upload new videos. You can also check out our website for plenty of resources and literature, which is www.addicts-anonymous.com. And you can also find us on Twitter, Reddit, Instagram, Facebook, and TikTok. So that's all we have for today. And until next time.